peace, infinite waters diving deep once again. The birds are singing. Life, death. What do we do when we lose a loved one? And I feel so many of us, we've lost someone's passed. And for me, when I look at death, for me, death is really a change of state. Nothing more, nothing less. Essentially, for me, there is only life. We are immortal. And I tell a lot of people that, and they're like, what do you mean we are immortal? You're going to die. And I'm like, yes, I will die in a physical sense, but essentially, energy can't be destroyed. It can only be transferred. And essentially, for me, so many of us, even as a society, we're not ready to talk about death. You don't mention death on the dinner table. Even if you go to a funeral, it's awkward. Sometimes there's this feeling of you don't even know what to say. I've had friends who have passed, and sometimes even that word passed, we're still using a euphemism because we can't really come to terms with it. And when we talk of death and life, for me, they are so related to each other. In essence, there is no separation. And for so many of us, we're still looking in the eyes of duality, in those eyes. And there has to be life, there has to be death. And for me, life and death are one and the same, because essentially, how do you even know you're alive? And this is something I asked myself, and then someone can say, well, you know because your heart is beating. But essentially, you only know when you start thinking. It's everything we've put into our minds which tells us who we are. The image that we have of ourselves, whether it's our bank account, our name, all of these things are coming to an end every single day. And this is what I realized on my journey. It's all coming to an end. But essentially, there's something which is eternal. And that's what I'm connected to. And for me, I just realized that a lot of times, a lot of people are afraid of a physical death because they're afraid to leave behind everything they have worked for in this 3D reality. The name, the status, the house, the cars, all of that is going to be left behind. And essentially what is going to be left is going to be this impersonal energy. And for me, I just realized that society is funny because that one way we are afraid of death. So many people, we don't talk about death. We celebrate life. Someone is born, a child is born, beautiful. Everyone is smiling. And then when someone dies, you don't even know what to do. So essentially, I realized that a lot of us, we're not even mature enough yet to even talk about this transition which is taking place, which is so fundamental because in essence, it's the other part of birth. And a lot of the times I look at it like we're afraid of death as a society, but at the same time we are involved in wars. We're the only species on the planet who celebrates people dying on the silver screen. And at the same time, it's one of these things because if we look at the elderly as well, we can see that a lot of times, a lot of people are in fear of death. But at the same time, many people live life like the show must go on, and it must go on. But at the same time, we don't really realize, for me, I had to realize that death is humanity's shadow. And essentially, when we talk about the shadow of humanity, we have to embrace it. And that's what I had to do. I had to merge with the shadow and essentially realize that I am timeless. I am immortal. And essentially, I've been here not from the beginning, because this whole concept of having a beginning and an end, in my mind, there is no beginning and an end. It's just, it always is. And for me, that's the most empowering thing when I realize that this whole concept of time is really a human man-made invention. And for a lot of us, time is fear. We celebrate birthdays in this society, which is nothing wrong with it, but essentially all of this is we're counting our own demise. And time equals to fear, which equals to scarcity, which helps us and it keeps us in a perpetual state of survival. So many of us, we're living our lives, but at the same time, we're not really able to see that we are living in a transient universe. And for me, this was something which I had to really look at myself in the mirror and say, yes, this is it. This is amazing, because a lot of us, we are, even if you look at the cosmetic industry, where everyone wants to look younger, which is fine, but at the same time, there is something, people are afraid of heading towards this movement through life. And for me, I've just realized that essentially, as co-creators on this planet, a lot of it doesn't matter how long you live for me anyway. It doesn't matter if you live for 500 years or 1,000 years, because essentially that's only a drop in the ocean compared to the amount of time and space in eternity. But essentially, for me, it just makes me realize the fragility of life and the sacredness of life, and really realize that we are limitless beings. Because essentially, when people, for me, everything equates, death equals everything out. Everyone is equal through death, but essentially death is just a change of state. I'm not afraid of death because I'm not afraid of life. And for me, on this journey, it's all about surrendering and dropping the sword, because essentially there is no battle for me. That's what I'm beginning to see on my journey, and connecting with like minds who are seeing the same in a kind of way. And death is a big business. And for me, that just makes me think why the program of death is so etched in humanity's minds as this is it, this is the end. And for a lot of us, I feel that we can't live longer even than 120 years old, because we've been programmed through schools to say, okay, this is the age where people start getting old. And I'm wondering, is this also programmed into our DNA? Because more and more I realize that with the cure, there is no profit. And that's why so many pharmaceutical companies, do they really want people to become well and to live longer than 120 years? Because then that's a frightening thought. You've got all of these people who are realizing their greatness, because I do know that essentially we are transformers, and I just feel that we are timeless. We can live as long as we want. We are already immortal. There is no beginning or end. But essentially, even within this human body, a lot of us, we've just accepted this indoctrination from childhood to say, okay, this is how you are going to age. It's almost like we've been put under a spell of some sort. But for me, death is viewed differently in different cultures. Some cultures, they embrace death. Some African cultures, South American cultures, they see death as a beautiful thing. They're smiling, they're dancing. Even some funerals, I've been some African funerals, Ghanaian funerals, West Indian funerals. Sometimes people are dancing, just celebrating the person's life. So essentially, it's amazing just to see how different cultures view death. But essentially, I feel that really and truly, a lot of it is based on our belief system. And it's not about being in fear of death. Death is the unknown. Death is the grim reaper. Death is the shadow. Death is what lies behind closed doors, which no one wants to see. But essentially, when I realize there's no battle, there's nothing to be afraid of, then essentially I realize that all of this is beyond human comprehension in terms of words anyways. It's indescribable. Only silence can maybe get even close, but words, forget about it, because words are, like there's a saying, words were created to hide the truth. So essentially, everything we talk about death is through words is only going to be contaminated. So essentially we have to be silent. But it's beautiful just to dive into it. And this is it. And for me, as I see it, the universe uses everything in nature. It doesn't waste anything. And therefore our bodies will be used for whatever the universe wants to do with it, whether that's to create grass, flowers, or what have you. But for me, I've always seen that the universe is this impersonal energy, which is essentially transforming itself all the time. We're transformers. Nature is a transformer, and we're not separate from that. So in my mind, we will be used. And a lot of people don't like to think of it like that, but for me it's empowering, because I realize that there's nothing wrong with talking about death. A lot of people say, okay, I don't want to talk about death, and they feel that death is suddenly going to disappear, but it still remains. People are dying all the time. And a lot of the times, a lot of us, we don't have a holistic approach to death, to realize that it is the incomprehensible. No one really knows why people die. We can say, of course, some people, they do things which lead to their death. But essentially, I'm just talking about random incidents which happen. Sometimes you hear, and it's really intellectually incomprehensible. We don't really know. And for me, that just shows me the infinite possibilities. And in essence, sometimes silence is the best way to understand the mysteries of life, because it speaks volumes. And sometimes, for me, the body never lies. And when we even look within our own faces, a lot of the times, many of us, we are not becoming alchemists. And for me, nature, there is no death in nature. If you look around, everything is in a constant state of creation. So that tells me that being an alchemist, we have to always constantly be in this state of creation where there is essentially no death. There's only transformation and immortality. And for me, that's nature's secret, because there is no death. Look outside of your window. Where is death? The flowers are continuously blossoming. They're changing states, but essentially there is only life in existence. And for me, I just see it like that. And I just feel that, yes, it's hard. A lot of people who have lost loved ones, but essentially energy can't be destroyed or transferred. And everyone we're constantly undergoing metamorphosis. We can talk about the caterpillar to the butterfly in the chrysalis. So for me, that's what happens with the human body. And some people have other ideas about death. Some people become very masochistic and say, well, we're all going to die, so let's create as much pain and as much havoc. But essentially, a lot of these people have neglected their heart space, and that's what's happened to so many of us on this planet. We have actually become desensitized. And basically that's basically shut down our heart space. So when your heart space is shut down, you can't feel anything. When you can't feel anything, then you're unaware. Then you can't be aware of what's happening. And that's what's happened to us. So for me, it's about connecting to the heart space and realizing that essentially no one ever really dies. But essentially while we're here, it's about living in the moment and realizing that when we are in the moment, fear disappears. It's only when we're in the past or when we're in the future that there's this fear of death, which is really the illusion, because essentially we are immortal. Infinite waters diving deep in front of the beautiful sunshine, and it's beaming bright. There's no death in the sun, only creation, magnificent. Peace.